fact that the United States has, in essence, become a rogue nation. If I ask somebody, I ask you right now, define what a rogue nation would be. It would be somebody who undermines existing international institutions, disobeys international law, is aggressive in starting wars and claiming lands that don't belong to it. America is going to pay 30% more for what it imports from China. Tell me how that's a win, because China realizes that it's completely integrated. They believe in a world that is cooperative, and it's not ideologically unified. It's just cooperative in terms of trade. Donald Trump believes in a world that is extractive. The United States takes what it wants from whoever to solve the problems that it has internally.
Welcome to World Affairs in Context, everybody. I'm very pleased to have with us Einar Tangen. Einar is Senior Fellow at Taihe Institute, political commentator, and founding partner of the Center for China and the World at City University of Macau. Thank you so much for joining us today, Einar. It is a pleasure.
Lena, thank you for having me. This is the first time, but it's actually a wonderful pleasure.
Absolutely. I've been following your commentary for a while, and I always feel that you provide such clarity and valuable insights into China's economy, policies, and the US-China relations. So I've been looking forward to this conversation. The United States and China, as you know, just agreed to slash tariffs in an effort to de-escalate tensions temporarily. The 90-day pause buys time for a more nuanced engagement, and it certainly appears to be very promising. What is your take on the outcomes of the US-China trade negotiations in Switzerland?
Okay, so Lena, I want to preface this. I mean, you have to go back to the big bluff. Look, everyone knows, tracks the trade flows coming in and out of their countries. They can differ slightly. But the fact is, everybody sees, in essence, everyone sees everybody's cards. Donald Trump trying to convince the world, and China in particular, that he had a royal straight flush. The problem with that is everyone can see his cards. And quite frankly, he doesn't. So they called his bluff. A lot of nations were concerned about being singled out and hammered by a nation like the United States. Why was Trump doing this? He simply has this vision of America basically surrounded by tributaries, countries that give, and America extracts, they give, and it's like the schoolyard bully. His goal is to take everybody's lunch money and have them thank him for it. And that's exactly what Donald Trump was trying to do. So he made a big bluff, doubled down on it, said, if you dare cross me, I'll, triple the tariffs, all this kind of nonsense. Once you get past 30, 40, 50%, it doesn't really matter. There isn't going to be much trade anyways. So in the end, many countries kind of waited and see. You had countries who went and tried to deal with Donald Trump, most notably Canada. That didn't work out very well for, quote, Governor Trudeau, or the 51st state. And then the broadside, 180 countries attacked with these massive tariffs, including a number of islands inhabited by penguins. They're very concerned. They don't know how to count. They don't have any money. They're trying to figure out how many fish it will take to get out from under these tariffs. And on the other hand, they're not quite certain what they export either. So you had this kind of very odd situation where Trump was trying to intimidate the world and create this hub where the United States is the hub and every country is in a bilateral relationship as a spoke. So that was the intention. It obviously didn't work. And the reason it doesn't work isn't because of the international situation. It doesn't work because it doesn't work for the American public. Tariffs are taxes. Countries don't pay them. I can't say this enough. People out there keep thinking they believe Donald Trump. Oh, China's paying for these tariffs. No, absolutely not. Goods come into the United States. Whoever imported them has to pay the tariff, and then they have to figure out how it's going to be spread around. The importers will certainly ask to have a discount. And those who are exporting can say yes or no. And then they have to decide how much of that they're going to pass on. Well, these importers weren't doing exactly terrific business to begin with. So they don't have the ability to cover this all from their profits. So they're going to pass it along. And when they do, it's going to mean inflation for the American public. Top of that, a lot of these importers just said, no, can't do it, can't take the risk that I import these things, and then all of a sudden I can't sell them. So what they did is they told the ships to turn around and go away. Well, what does that mean? It means shortly, regardless of what Trump has done in the last couple of days with China in terms of making some sort of agreement, there's going to be empty shelves. Empty shelves generally drive prices up. Americans, before the election, over 70% of them thought that they were living paycheck to paycheck. Now, if it wasn't a reality, but this is how they felt. Imagine how they feel as they go forward. Their portfolios, if they had a 401k, have dropped by 20, 30%. They're looking towards higher prices. The poor are actually going out and doing payday loans to buy groceries. Mm-hmm. You understand? They go to a grocery store. They don't have credit. They don't have cash. They do is they sign over their paycheck, and they're paying the equivalent of 300 to 500% inflation on a yearly basis so that they can buy groceries to feed themselves. This is the state of America. Over 10% are impoverished. The middle class has gone from 61% in 1971 to a reported last year, when they looked at median income, to 40%. 21%, or a third, middle class has disappeared. Now, people will say that some of them went into the upper middle class, but not many enough. Most have dropped down into the poor. This is the state of America. So when you start talking about what happened there, it was a bluff, it was called, but China has to be the adult in the room. Be great to laugh, and time is on China's side. Does it hurt China? Absolutely. There are small, medium-sized business entities that are really, really hurting right now because of the uncertainty that Donald Trump has created. But the fact is, the U.S. consumers are being hit harder. They're the ones who are paying the tariffs. And as a result of that, there was a time limit on how long Trump could withstand the pressure of the very people who voted him into office. If as long as they thought he had a plan, that he was going to do something to turn the situation around, I think many of his supporters said, okay, we can take a little pain. A little pain doesn't mean losing your house or your business, defaulting on your credit cards, your student loans, your car loan. No, this isn't what they're looking for. The number one priority for the people who voted for Donald Trump and held their nose was that he was, in their minds, a businessman, somebody who understood pricing. And he promised that day one, in his campaign appearances, day one, he was going to control prices. Well, he hasn't. So today we find ourselves with Trump facing the reality he cannot impose these tariffs, not only for everything I've said, but also because it's affecting the long-term bond rate. The U.S. economy goes down, and it has to pay more for its debt, and the debts increase because he's passing a $4 trillion gift to the very wealthy. All of a sudden, last year the budget was $6 billion, approximately, just under, and the tax revenues were $4 billion. That's a $2 billion gap, a third of your entire budget. That went on to the debt pile, and this year it's going to be even worse. So you start looking at these situations. All of a sudden, he realized that was the first time he said, well, we'll have a 90-day reprieve on these imposition of these tariffs. And even, Lena, I don't know if you saw this, his people were on Capitol Hill before a congressional committee testifying that we are solid. We stand behind these tariffs. We will never get in.
Mhm.
And a congressman said to him, "Hey, your boss just tweeted, and he's going to put it on hold for 90 days. What do you have to say about that?" "Well, I could possibly talk about what I talk about with the president."
Yeah.
I mean, it was laughable, really, really laughable. I mean, we're laughing now, but I mean, can you imagine being in that situation where you go up to the Capitol Hill, you're completely unprepared, and you have the rug pulled out from under you
Mhm.
while you're defending the very guy who did it? So, this is the state of chaos that is in the Trump administration, and is why nobody believes that they can trust him. They don't know what's going to happen next. And if you're a businessman, consumer, you want to have some certainty. Right now, there's no trust, no certainty. So, a long-winded way of saying that the situation as it stands was forced, it was inevitable. The question is, what happens from here?
The reaction to the results of the talks have been very controversial here in the United States. There are those who say, well, Donald Trump blinked first, and then there is the second category of people who think, well, actually, China reduced duties on American imports to 10%. In comparison, US tariffs on Chinese goods will fall to 30%. So China is still facing higher tariffs than the United States in bilateral trade. And so they perceive, the second group perceives this as a win for the United States, even though, as you just mentioned, higher tariffs typically entail higher prices for consumers here domestically. So I've seen several comments of this nature on a video that I uploaded yesterday, and I was just curious, what would be your response to that second category of people who still take it as a win?
Well, there's Econ 101. They should enroll, uh, figure out how to do a little bit of simple math. The U.S. imports one quarter of its consumer economy. That means one out of every $4 is imported. You compare that to China. China is minuscule. If you look at what the U.S. imports, and it's not just from China. Everyone talks about China as if it's the only game in town. It's not all coming from China, but a lot of the component pieces are. So if you're buying something from Vietnam or Cambodia or Malaysia, Indonesia, even Australia, I don't care where, you can be buying it from Europe. Guess what? A lot of component pieces come from China. That's why China is single-handedly higher in production than the next 10 countries combined. So this is the reality. So you can play with the numbers, you can make all these things seem like a win-loss. It isn't. It's a loss for America. America is going to pay 30% more for what it imports from China. Tell me how that's a win. These are things that are necessary when people go to prepare their kids for school next year, and they're thinking, well, I have to buy some sneakers because his or her grew over the summertime, and I have to buy some clothes and a backpack, pencils, paper. There's some books. Guess where all of that stuff comes from? China. So I mean, how are you winning by taxing your people an additional 30%? Right? For China, the taxes aren't going to hit the consumers; they're going to hit businesses who use not so much services because they're not taxing that, but machinery from the U.S. But the most valuable machinery that China would want to buy, and that they would buy even if it had 30% tariff on top of it, is in fact the stuff that the U.S. won't sell: chips, memory, certain kinds of high technology associated with avionics, things like this. So, you have a situation where I just wish people would just put aside all the kind of nonsense that's out there. Just do the math. Simply do the math. You're paying an extra 30%. How are you winning? How is China losing? I don't even understand the concept.
Exactly. And I think this is why it's so important to be able, at least sometimes, to just put politics aside, put your political sort of affiliation aside, and really try to look at things as they are without, using this lens of, you know, following a certain line of thinking always. And I think trying to look at things from different perspective should help people understand the outcomes of where we are in terms of US-China negotiations at this point in time. And hopefully, I really hope that this video will also help clarify what's going on and how that affects people here in the United States, and how this economic mess that we're in right now actually what it means to them. So another interesting thing is that Trump says tariffs are essentially a tool to incentivize foreign companies to manufacture in the United States. Does that strategy also require a weaker US dollar?
Okay, this is a big topic, actually. It sounds like a simple question, but it isn't. Okay, so, part of everyone talks about, how the jobs disappeared. Well, why did they disappear? They disappeared because you had a strong dollar. Why did you have a strong dollar? Because the dollar was the trade dollar. People had to buy dollars. That made the dollar strong against other currencies. When you have a strong currency and you can buy things for less, made in other countries, guess what? If you don't, your competitor will. And if your competitor does that, pretty soon you're going to be out of business. So you set up a chain reaction. The addiction to debt that America, or precisely Washington, had created a strong dollar, which moved business, jobs overseas. If the US did not have a strong dollar, it was competing peg for peg, it was just about competition, it would have been a very, very different story. All right. As long as they could be, quote, competitive. But as soon as they lost that competitive edge, of course, you don't have a choice. Even if your American competitors don't go, if your European competitors go, guess what? You're done for. They're going to eat your lunch. You'll be on the bankruptcy line. So what are you supposed to do? You don't do it. But it wasn't their fault. Everyone says, oh, there's greedy guys in the corporate. Yeah, they are greedy. Yeah, they are short term. Do they care about workers? I really wonder. I sit on boards. Some people do. A lot of people don't care about the profit. The fact is, they were reacting to realities created by government. Government addicted to debt. They didn't want to give the bad news to the American public that if you want more, you have to pay for it. So they borrowed it. And they borrowed it at cheap rates because they could, because the dollar was strong. Where is anybody reflecting and taking responsibility for this? Nowhere. It's somehow everybody else's fault that we in America are not doing well. I mean, we have a drug addiction problem. Does anybody ever ask why? Why is the wealthiest, most powerful, militarily secure nation on earth, why do people want to kill themselves or be zonked out? You've seen the videos of people in California around the United States, just acting. They're on drugs in the middle of the street. They're living there. They're tweaking out on the sidewalk, and no one seems to be doing much about it. But where's the question of why is it that people are so unhappy that they're turning to this type of thing? And it's a dead end road, literally. I mean, the number of people being killed by fentanyl is incredible. And it's an idea of you want to blame it on China. I hate to tell you this. Anyone with a chemistry degree can take the stuff under your sink and concoct, all right, a chemical that will kill you, but also make you high. Right? Unless you want to take away all the chemicals from everywhere, take away people's knowledge of chemistry, right? The ability to manufacture synthetic opioids or whatever is still going to be there. Stop blaming other people. Take responsibility for your life. I mean, the Republicans I know, one thing I always loved about them is they said, well, there has to be a line where you take responsibility for yourself. Do you see that in the American public today? Do you see it in any of the, quote, leaders in Washington? Well, I could say that, quite frankly, for many leaders around the world. Very people are saying, let's reflect, let's figure out what we did wrong, let's take responsibility, let's have a plan to figure out what we should need to do to get back on track. You don't hear it. In America, our infrastructure is crumbling. I was chairman of my city's debt commission. I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I used to constantly tell people, you have improvements the last 50 years, and they're already 100 years old. You're spending more money repairing than, over a period cost of replacing them, right? It's much more efficient to replace them with things that work rather than trying to put Band-Aids on them constantly to keep them working, right? This is a story across America. And where's the leadership? Where's anybody standing up and saying, look, we got ourselves into the mess and we need to get out of it. We need to be more competitive. We need to use our advantages. We don't need this revisionist, regressive idea of going back and recreating a mirror manufacturing economy, which will automatically have, create overcapacity worldwide. You bring manufacturing back home, do you think that stops being in China? No, it'll continue. And the question is, with that overcapacity, who's going to win? And who is going to invest? If you're a businessman and your business depends on the political situation, whether they keep tariffs in place, you're taking a massive risk, especially given that, what Trump is doing. Highly likely there's going to be a change in the White House come 4 years, right? Do you think you can get all your profit back from your investment within that period of time? And if you can't, what happens afterwards? So there are so many logical things that people are not looking at. They want to blame somebody else. I understand that's a very human nature. It's not my fault. The dog did it. Yeah, that's it. But, it's just, that's the difference between being a child and an adult. Children claim they're victims and it's not their fault. If the cookie jar is broken and they have cookie crumbs on their mouth and their hands, they just say, I didn't do it. Wasn't me. Well, as an adult, you say, well, it was. You need to take responsibility and you need to stop doing that. Don't break the cookie jar. Don't take cookies when you're not supposed to. It doesn't seem we have a lot of adults in the room. I think China is trying. It's in an awkward position. Think about it. Here you are. You have a unilateral trade war declared by Donald Trump on 180 countries. People are afraid. They want to hand over their lunch money. China steps up. And, but they can't even gloat at the fact that this is going to hurt Donald Trump, because hurting Donald Trump, in this particular case, hurts America. Hurting America is going to hurt the global economy. If 10% of the US demand were to go away, it would have a massive effect worldwide, because 19%, we're talking about 1.9% reduction in global GDP. I mean, that's over $2 trillion just gone. All the resources that went into that 2 trillion, all the manufacturing, all the labor, right, would be gone. And it's going to hit everybody really hard. So here's China. They have to somehow manage Donald Trump, not show any weakness, because he likes weakness, as Trudeau. He showed up with his knee pads at Mar-a-Lago and said, listen, can't we just get along? And Trump, as soon as he left, Trump called him Governor Trudeau and said 51st state, laughed at him, said, I'm going to put more tariffs on them. He was playing a classic bully. So with a classic bully, you cannot be giving in. You have to make sure they understand you're not giving in. But for the sake of the playground, right, you're going to have to try to make sure that he's done. Now, this is my prediction, Lena. About 3 weeks ago, China put forward a 6-point white paper. In that paper, one of the points was talking about phase one. Now, why would you talk about phase one? It didn't really work out that well because of COVID and other reasons associated with Donald Trump. uh, so why would you talk about it? Well, obviously, they're inviting the US to consider a phase two. In addition to that, since that time, China has unilaterally gotten rid of the tariffs on certain types of computer components and then also certain types of chemicals. So what did they signal? Said, let's take the temperature down. They met not in Washington, where every other country has had to go and beg, or Mar-a-Lago. They met in Geneva, home of the WTO, World Trade Organization. Not very popular in Washington, but very, very popular in the rest of the world. And add insult to injury, they made they made a briefing to the head of the WTO, who was very happy to be included because it's the United States, as you well know, who is preventing the WTO from functioning properly by preventing appellate judges to be seated. It takes 3 judges to hear an appel and any appeal. That means that if 2 countries or 3, whatever, there's a dispute, you go to, in essence, a tribunal. Tribunal makes a decision. If anybody isn't happy with that decision, they can appeal it. And the decision is not final until the appellate court rules. But if you have no appellate court, there's no final ruling. Therefore, WTO does not function very well. So that was the whole point, to have a settlement mechanism. The United States doesn't want a settlement mechanism. Their reason for doing so is saying, well, we don't acknowledge that there should be any power greater than the United States, despite the fact that the U.S. was instrumental in setting up the WTO and setting the stage and the standards for China to join the WTO. So it's been all over for years. But when it comes to actually acknowledging that there's a power and a settlement mechanism that all should apply to all, the U.S. says no, absolutely not. And the same thing is true of the ICC and a number of other issues that the U.S. has refused to acknowledge at the level of the UN, United Nations. So, in a nutshell, China is trying to be the adult. Donald Trump, excuse my analogy, is a spoiled 11-year-old child who doesn't have an idea of what he's doing. But you cannot just simply leave him on the floor of the grocery store screaming and crying. It would have too much effect on everybody else. So they're going forward. They're trying to do it. Now, why do I mention the phase two? Well, phase two is an interesting mechanism because it's operational day by day. You don't buy all of the stuff you promised to buy on day one. If Donald Trump violates the agreement, the buying stops. So this is a way of tying Trump into an agreement which hopefully he will stick to, because I don't think anybody trusts Donald Trump, not given the fact that he's broken so many treaties. I mean, here's a guy who negotiated, the replacement of NAFTA with Mexico and Canada, only to come back 4 years later and nullify it. I mean, that doesn't say I should trust you, right? So at this point, China's trying to do the right thing. And I'm not saying China's right and perfect and everything like that. I'm just saying that this is about survival, not only of China, but a country, China, that has 140 primary trade relations with countries in the world. There are about 195, if you count the Holy See and a couple of small ones, countries. So when you start thinking about 140, you're really talking not only the majority, but you're really talking about almost 3/4. So this is the situation as it exists. I'll let you ask your next question.
No, I think you make a really excellent point and sort of draw our attention to the fact that there is a considerable loss of trust, of sort of global trust in the United States as a state that truly pursues stability, right? Whether it is economic stability or maybe setting a trade policy or more broadly economic policy and then a certain trade policy and then sort of sticking to it. So it seems that it's a good sign that the US-China negotiations are taking place. It looks promising. However, it's too early to celebrate. But it seems that the damage has already been done to this global sort of framework where a certain amount of trust is perceived to be there. And so US stability is viewed as that foundation in global economy. Do you see any related implications to the US dollar of this loss of trust and stability? Do you see any related implications to the US dollar as a reserve currency? And more specifically, you spoke about bonds and any like US treasuries, dollar denominated assets. And their status as a safe investment instrument worldwide. Has that perception considerably changed? Do you think it's past the point of no return where countries are truly looking for alternatives just based on the fact that they think, okay, it doesn't really look like we can trust you, the United States, anymore?
Well, I don't have to answer that question because you just did. I mean, look, I mean, it's obvious, the lack of trust, and the fact that the United States has, in essence, become a rogue nation. What is if I ask somebody, I ask you right now, define what a rogue nation would be? It would be somebody who undermines existing international institutions, disobeys international law, is aggressive in taking, starting wars and claiming lands that don't belong to it. Right? This would describe the United States. We've broken treaties, whether it's Paris Climate Accord, Kyoto. And this is going back long standing. We can always point to Donald Trump, but Donald Trump, in the end, is a symptom. He's a symptom of American pain. The American people have been lied to for such a long period of time. And this issue that in 1971, 61% of America was middle class. Last year, there was a study done based on median income. That number had fallen to 40%. That is why America is unhappy. They've lost. Fully a third of Americans have shifted. Now, a few of them shifted upwards. Vast majority shifted downwards. And this is the story of America. So when we start talking about bonds, you have to first start talking about the pyramid. The pyramid is the people. People who work, who pay taxes, who are the lifeblood of America. Right? They are suffering. There's a small group, the top 1%, who are doing very well, and they're getting richer by the day. They're actually, this chaos has made them richer and richer. And, with Donald Trump tweeting out when to buy, they've done even better. So they're not hurting, but America is. All right. That is undermining the America as an institution, as an economic, when you start talking about trust. No one trusts their government. Then you go abroad, and people, what I said before, rogue state. How does they say we can't trust the U.S.? It's not a reliable partner. It is not somebody who believes in an international order or the rule of law, or they do believe in an international order. It's the order of the jungle, where we're stronger, so we just tell you what to do. And it really doesn't sit well in a lot of countries, obviously. So let's start talking about bonds. Why am I going back? Because when you have internal division, strife, weakness, it's hard to be very strong abroad. And abroad, things are turning against the United States. The debt pile, 36.12 trillion and growing, expected to be 38 trillion at the end of this year. That before this current bill, which is pending before Congress, which would reduce taxes, mostly on the very wealthy, by another 4 trillion over a period of time, which will once again be added where? To the debt pile. So right now, leaders in Washington have refused to deal with a huge elephant that stands behind them every day in terms of these debts. and they keep adding to it. They're not only adding to it, for things that they can't afford. They're doing it because they don't make enough. Bring in 4 trillion and they spend six. How long can that continue? Fact is, it's been going on for all but a few years during the Clinton administration. But today it is a order of magnitude which has never existed except when we've been at war. So you have a situation, we're not at war, but we're spending the same amount of money in terms of additional debt. And of course, people are starting to wonder about that debt pile, right? We're going to have about half that debt pile is going to have to be rolled over in the next few years. The question is, what is the rate going to be? Earlier that Donald Trump got very nervous when he started to understand that people were pricing in the fact that he was depressing the economy, that he was growing his debt, and they're worried about the United States being able to do that. Central banks have been pulling out of the dollar, so have large funds. Individuals went in because the rates were higher. But if they think the rates are going to be higher later, they're going to pull out now. Have to. I don't pull out now and I have bonds and the rates go up. My bonds effectively go down dramatically. So you could have a run on bonds that could drive the rates higher and higher. You could have a situation where the U.S. was paying out $3 to $4 trillion just for debt, not paying off the debt, just the interest on it. So when people start thinking about this, it makes them nervous. And of course, they start pricing in their nervousness. If things are going to go bad, I want to make some money doing it. I have to justify my risk. U.S., which used to be considered the no risk market when it came to things like treasuries, 7-day resets. I know I was an investment banker. I dealt in bonds. I did quite a bit of work in that, even for the city of Milwaukee. No, I mean, bonds are supposed to be safe, boring, not something where you're going to see large fluctuations. And now that is happening. So Donald Trump is nervous. World is nervous. Trust is gone. And the question is, how do you rebuild it? And that is exactly why China is going to push forward this kind of idea of a, phase two. And you heard Donald Trump. I don't know if you watched him. He's not the same man that you see when he's on the campaign trail. He's very much subdued, looked defeated, was a bit confused, kept on talking about reunification with China. I don't recall that China and the U.S. were ever one, but he's talking about reunification. Maybe he's thinking of North Korea, but that would be worrying if he is. So here he is, a defeated man, kind of going on about these things. But during the period, he started talking about phase one and, China needs to buy more from us. Why would you talk about that, right? Unless that was something that was on the table. And as I said, China believes that in order to keep Trump on the straight and narrow, there has to be something in it. He's transactional. If he knows day by day, if he goes back on that agreement, he will, in essence, be facing the same problems he had before the agreement. And he sees that as untenable. And so, therefore, he will stick to the program. Now, this program is not only aimed at helping China, it's also aimed at helping the world because China realizes that it's completely integrated. They believe in a world that is cooperative. And it's not ideologically unified, it's just cooperative in terms of trade. Donald Trump believes in a world that is extractive. The United States takes what it wants from whoever to solve the problems that it has internally. And those two visions are starkly on display. The U.S. Is not winning that PR battle. China still has issues it has to settle, but right now it's the United States and Donald Trump are making the China look like the golden boy, like the country you can trust as opposed to the U.S.
To what extent does the tariff war, if you will, is indicative of a broader shift in global power and, more specifically, the leverage held by the United States in its relations with China?
To put it simply, the United States tried to convince people that it had a royal straight flush. It was a bluff. Everyone knew it. The bluff was called. And now, as I put it, Donald Trump created a crucible. And the idea was to make America's steel sharp, formidable. Instead, it showed the weakness, the vulnerabilities of the United States. He has done actually more for China than China could have ever done itself. China would never even thought of trying to separate the United States from Mexico and Canada, from Europe, right? That would never have even crossed their mind that that was something that they could do, and I don't think they would have attempted to do it. But Donald Trump has done it. He's in essence united the world against the United States. He's done exactly the opposite of what he intended. So that's where we stand today.
One of the most consequential moves by China in response to Donald Trump's tariffs was the trade restriction on exports of certain rare earth minerals. And I know this is a very big topic, but while many countries have reserves of various minerals and a variety of rare earth resources, China has been focusing on investing in modern industrial infrastructure, and it has an unparalleled capacity for refinement at an efficient price point, which, unlike minerals, is quite challenging to come by in other countries. How important of a factor is this in current US-China negotiations?
Well, obviously, it is a factor. I think the external factors are really less important to somebody like Donald Trump than how it affects the internal situation. You know, his base, the markets, and also the television news programs. Those are the things that he cares about. Everything else, it doesn't matter to him. He doesn't watch it. He doesn't care. He doesn't want anyone to even explain it to him. He just doesn't have the time for it. So, I mean, at this point, China has, according to the people that I talk to, who are industry insiders, both inside and outside China, somewhere between a 10 and 15-year advance on processing. So rare earths are not rare. I always hate to tell people that. They say, yes, it's called rare earths, but they're not rare. They're everywhere. The question is, what concentration are they? And can you gather them? And that's fine. Oh, you have a bunch of rare earths, right? How are you going to use them? A lot of the processes we're talking about require purity levels above 98, 99%. Well, guess who can do that and who can't? China can. No one else can. They can refine to lesser levels, but they don't have the same. So even aside from cost, right, you cannot get the quality you need in these particular areas, despite the fact that you have these rare earths. So, you know, I have a friend who's doing rare earths somewhere in Africa, and I always laugh and I said, you're pulling a scam. You can get all the rare earths you want. Who's going to process them? You know, his whole thing is we'll be the rare earths place for Europe. Well, that's great. Where's it going to be processed? Says, well, that's up to them. I'm just getting the raw materials together. Well, this is something that China is good at, and others aren't. In the sense that you have to have a complete solution. Having half a solution is like having half a brain. It's not going to get you very far. So at this point, yes, China has a card in that area, but they're actually using it very sparingly. They could have just said, we're cutting you off. They did follow up with South Korea, which was acting as a conduit to bring stuff to the U.S. It wasn't noticeable. They only went up by 113% in terms of demand, despite kind of making the same number of processors. You're kind of like, well, why did you double demand, but you haven't doubled your output? Oh, I don't know. Anyways, These things are, and quite frankly, there's plenty of that going on in China. There's so many companies that are quote producing in Vietnam or Malaysia, Indonesia, you name it. But all the components, the only thing that's happening there is either it's the crate is being restamped on the on the dock, or it's going to a very light factory where a few assembly things are put together, and then a name tag is put on, and then it's sent abroad. So, but that's my point about tariffs. All you do is increase economic dislocation. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have an efficient factory that's producing and it can't produce for a particular market, and they have to go somewhere else to produce, they have to expend extra capital. So they have the capacity at one, but now they have one plus the capacity in order to deal with that other market. That's economic dislocation. That could have been put to productive use. Instead, it's being used up because of political purposes. So the short answer to what you said is that these tariffs don't work very well. China is being restrained in its application of them. In the end, if they cut off the West, it would just be like the West cutting off chips from China. Eventually, they could come up with an ability to refine rare earths. I don't know how long it would take, but during that period, they would suffer. But after that period, they'd be independent. And they probably will try to do that because this is a strategic area. But I mean, what it underlines is that the world is interconnected. And trying to say, I'm going to take my ball and go home just doesn't work.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, the world doesn't have to be aligned ideologically. We just have to find common ground and common way to derive those mutual benefits from these relations. We don't have to necessarily, put everybody in this box of, are we okay with their political structure, ideological structure or not. I think that as you underscored already, looking for ways to cooperate despite differences is certainly the way to go. And Einar, maybe the last question for today. Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, said that he doesn't really rule out tariffs increasing if the US and China don't manage to have productive negotiations now through mid-August, I believe. It seems that all options are on the table right now. What are your predictions or perhaps expectations with regards to how this economic conflict might transform over the next several months?
Okay, Scott's just this is straight from his boss. Don't show any weakness. Remind them that we will come after him. We'll beat you up unless you give us your your, your lunch money. I mean, this is straight out of a 11-year-old playground film. Hey, you think you're tough? Well, I'll come back and I'll beat you up if I don't get what I want. It's juvenile. Scott Benson's could say whatever he wants. I mean, he's an interesting guy. Here's one of Soros's lieutenants. I mean, most trusted lieutenants. Who, when he worked for the firm, did fine. When he went out his own, oh my goodness, he did not do well. And suddenly he's in politics. He seems to be a guy who likes very strong leaders and who he seems to flatter quite openly. Follow the boss, right? We've seen these types before. I don't think he's particularly brilliant. He's been caught in all sorts of let us say, improbable statements, some contradicting others. I don't really take what he says very seriously. The fact is, in August, does the world change? Do tariffs all of a sudden make sense? Are bonds going to go down because Donald Trump wants them to? Right? The world remains the same, whether it's today or in August. All the factors that we have just been discussing remain the same. So this idea that somehow something is different in August, I'd love to hear why. And this idea that if we don't get our way, well, like I said, that's just playground talk by somebody who has nothing. And I hate to put it on such a terrible note, but the only thing as I said, I expect is that there will be a phase two deal because it's way that China can tie the U.S. to a consistent set of behaviors until Donald Trump is gone. Everyone anticipates that given the pain he's caused his own supporters, that the midterms are not going to be pretty for Donald Trump. I'd heard from Republican strategists who said, well, we kind of factor that in, but what we're counting on is that we start this process off, he loses the House and Senate, and thereafter, for the next 2 years, we blame the Democrats for everything that went wrong. And then J.D. Vance is able to come in as president because he says, oh, if you just listened to us, everything would have been beautiful. And he gets back in, and then he somehow hands it back to Donald Trump. I can guarantee you one thing: J.D. Vance he's president. He's never going to give the power back to J.D. Vance. Anyway, that you hear all these kind of far-fetched plans, but these people really believed it. They think that they're being smart, that they're playing chess, three-dimensional chess or 10-dimensional chess or whatever you want to think. They think they're very, very clever. I don't think so, because I keep reminding them, I don't care what you think, the realities remain the same, and that Donald Trump has started America off on a path that is going to lead already, regardless of what happens, to a lot of pain. I mean, the number of ships that have been turned away or gone back to China means it's going to be empty shelves for quite some time. And when empty shelves, as I said, prices go up because supply and demand. People are going to be reminded of that. I'm not going to forget this. I'm not going to forget the fact that they have to do extra payday loans in order to put food in the mouths of their children, or that they went bankrupt, lost their house, their car, are under legal proceedings because of their credit card debt. These are things that people don't forget, and they will blame Donald Trump.
Einar, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you. Thank you so much for this very insightful and timely conversation.
Well, I don't know about that. I feel like I've depressed myself. So
No,
I'm,
sometimes
I'm hoping.
sometimes we need a dose of reality, and I think this was a very, very interesting and very detailed conversation about the recent developments.
Well, I hope, you know what, I hope I'm absolutely wrong and that somehow out of all of this chaos comes some sort of order that helps people. I always said, the key to life is enjoy life and help others enjoy life. And unfortunately, I see too little of that. So to anybody who's watching, I hope you think about my words and that if they make sense to you, that you follow them.